Legend has it that if you go to a big-name jewelry store, your faceting friend will appear from the darkness and say, "Look at those terrible meats." The color gemstones section of jewelry stores can be a waking nightmare for faceters. Huge windows, missed meats, random facets, a scratchy polish, ooh. Although I wanted to make a video demonstrating this phenomenon, there's no way I could bring myself to try recording in a jewelry store just to bash them. Fortunately, I got my hands on an old parcel of gemstones that were originally bought with the intent to set in jewelry, but weren't, and instead sat around for 40 years. Now, I tried making a video like this before, talking about my wife's wedding ring, but that was a diamond, and diamonds are a different beast altogether. I don't think a poor cut is allowed on the market with how tightly controlled they are. What we're talking about here are the everyday gemstones: garnet, topaz, amethyst, and so on. Let's start with this humble amethyst. This emerald cut actually isn't bad. The individual facets are parallel. They have overall good meets apart from a slight miss on the pavilion over on this corner here. It doesn't quite meet up. It happens to us all. But there is a glaring flaw in this stone, and let's make it a little more obvious. Look, smoky quartz. Smoky quartz. Now, if I tilt it, that's fine to be able to read it, but if you're looking at a stone head on, you should not be able to read something through it. You shouldn't be able to wave your hand behind a stone and see your fingers moving up and down in time with it. This is called a window, and it's an optical phenomena that happens when the cut angles aren't optimized for the stone, as in this case, where they're too shallow. That means that the light goes in through the top and escapes out the bottom, and vice versa. As a result, you can essentially see through the stone like a window. This kills the color and sparkle of a stone, in the center of it anyway. You can see it's still got some good color around the margins there, with a little bit of mixture of blue and purple, which actually looks pretty neat. However, I'd say the window is the worst sin of the bunch of commercial cuts. The whole point of faceting a stone is to take advantage of the translucency of a gemstone to capture their light. And you turn this stone over and it's so flat, it's basically like a rose-cut cab if you flattened the top or like domed it a little bit. Gemology for Schmucks is one of the other many YouTubers who have talked about commercial cuts, and he referred to this kind of thing as a potato cut, which I think applies more to something like this, where it's an oval and, it's just kind of squat and potato-ish. Now, here's the thing, though. Sometimes this is a perfectly serviceable way to cut gemstones. If you want a big amethyst like this, and you just want some purple, and that's it, then you'll save a lot of money by getting a stone like this. The shallowness of the angles can also be an advantage. This stone is about 6.5 millimeters tall, and we'll set it right there. And a well-proportioned version would be about 50% taller, closer to 10 millimeters. Although the exact proportions depends on the cut. That means that a well-proportioned stone will stick up higher than this, commercial cut. And maybe that would make it unwieldy if you wanted a large stone. Or it would require a deeper setting for setting into actual jewelry, which could cost money for modifying a setting or something like that. It's a trade-off. I'm not going to judge you for buying something that you like if you like this stone, but I will judge the stone. Silently, but I'll judge it. However, to my surprise, I actually have a few more positive notes to make about commercial cut stones. It's not just a total bash fest here. And so one is that these cuts are often made to maximize the yield from the rough. On the cutting side, that means that they can charge more for the stones, since stones are sold by weight and not dimensions. On the buyer side, that means that you get, more meat on your stone and maybe a richer color from some angles. This is actually a smoky quartz that's so big and dark that it looks black in a lot of lights. Here, let's compare This is my well-cut smoky quartz that we looked at from behind a minute ago. It's sparkling. It's an emerald cut compared to essentially a brilliant design, so it's not quite a fair comparison. But let's take a look at the height of these two. This much smaller stone is taller, a little bit taller than this much bigger stone. Related to the note about, getting more meat for your buck, some countries don't allow the exporting of certain rough above certain sizes, or sometimes they don't export rough at all anymore. Tanzanite comes to mind, where I don't think any rough material can be exported anymore. It all has to be cut, at least to some extent, faceted in-house before being exported. I think it might be above a carat in size, but I mean, that's basically anything that's going to be worth it on the market. I don't have any tanzanite, so let's look at some star sapphires from this lot instead. Because of the limits, you're not going to see new big material like tanzanite on the market unless it's been faceted. It's almost always in the faceter's interest to cut as large a stone as possible from the rough. It's actually maybe worth cutting a windowed or oddly proportioned stone in order to maximize their profits. And then they can sell it overseas, and an overseas cutter may recut it to a better proportioned stone if they want. Furthering our tangent here, sometimes it makes more sense to buy a poorly faceted stone and recut it rather than cut from rough. Because it's been cut and polished like this one has, even poorly, you can get a better idea of the quality of stone in terms of the final color that it's going to be, and look for veils and inclusions much easier through a clear and polished stone than you can from, say, some rough like this where there's jagged edges and things that make it difficult to see, in some cases, the veils that are on the inside. So if a cut stone is only marginally more expensive than a rough stone, it's worth cutting into your profits a little bit to get the better guarantee on your final stone product. So in the case of this amethyst, it's very clear there's no issues on the inside of it. I could cut this stone into a couple smaller stones, or just try to make as big a stone as possible by closing that window on the back by sacrificing some length and width. And I'd have a much better chance of getting a clean stone out of it, unless I do something wonky with my faceting and cause a fracture to appear. So let's look at a couple other stones in my new collection. Not all of them are windowed. Cubic zirconia actually look good, although up close you can see maybe there's a little bit of age showing in some of these. There's a few chips on the pavilion if there's a keel. That can happen quite a bit. In some cases there is a few areas of kind of rough polish. And commercial polish is considered good enough at 14,000 grit, which can, in some cases, still leave noticeable grooves upon close inspection if you were to look at this at 10 times loop magnification. Artisanal faceters, by and large, polish to at least about a 50,000 grit finish, if not 100,000 grit. CZ, so this is CZ, which has a high refractive index of about 2.15, meaning that it's easier to get a good cut from shallow angles. That's not super shallow, but let's see. Let's look at, grab this quartz that I have. You can see I had to go, they're kind of comparable in size. I had to go have a deeper pavilion in my quartz than they had to for the CZ in order to avoid windowing in the quartz. This same cut in an amethyst or a quartz, smoky quartz, whatever other kind of quartz like amethyst, cut in the same way, that would definitely be a windowed stone. And you can see I leave my girdle a little bit chunky in some cases, whereas theirs are relatively thin and also unpolished, which I've come around to the idea of not polishing the girdle quite as much because it disappears when you set a stone, and getting it up to about that pre-polished stage actually is fine, and especially since they're so thin, it's not really noticeable in the final stone. So you can see on this one, the pavilion doesn't come to a point. There's a little bit of a keel there, even though this is a round stone, it should come to a point We've got a few missed facets over here where they're not meeting where they should, like right there. And these are overcut with the big facets are overcut, and these ones that don't come in level. And on the back side, let's see. There's a big difference in those two. Those should be even sized, those two triangles. And it's kind of the same story all the way around, suggesting there might be some stair stepping going on with them. And then this facet, this long triangular one here, you can see on the right side of it, if I can get the light just right, on the right side of that long triangle that goes from girdle to pavilion or culet, on the right side there's a little bit of a wedge of not quite as polished. And I'll zooming in on it here, you can see they must have missed the, or they didn't cheat quite enough to get rid of that. So there's a little bit of an less polished side. There's like pre-polished stage there. And then here we have these two facets that are different size, and also if I zoom in here, we have there's just a couple of little facets down there, those little triangles right in the center of the screen between the big facets that looks like they started to misindex or polished over from the sides and didn't quite make it all the way around. Now some of the streakiness on this is because I've been handling it. It's a decent polish actually, but I think this stone exemplifies a lot of the small issues with commercial cuts. Although overall it is decent in terms of there's not really windowing, so it's a better cut than some of those, potato cuts or the more windowed cuts where you essentially lose the color of the stone in the middle. Even a smaller but better cut stone, you might like the color of one better than the other, but there's a lot more life in a better cut stone than there is in these commercial cuts. That's just my opinion though.